also a political scientist, is joining us on the show tonight. My name is Cornelius Omusa, and I invite you to join us in this conversation that will help us understand this issue, the debate that is actually moving across the country, the temperatures that are rising as the country is gearing towards the 2022 general election. This conversation is also live on our Facebook page, that is KAK TV Kenya, and YouTube KAK TV Kenya. Gentlemen, welcome to Power Brief tonight.
Thank you so much.
Mr. Kegoli, it's been a while, but Mr. Philip has been here. Also, we've had Mr. Kosgei.
Yes.
This week has had a lot of issues happening, and we have this matter of the by-elections. And Edgar came here really on top of his voice on what happened in Ruri, what happened in Juja, and also partially in Bonchari. That is a battle between the Jubilee Party, the ODM Party, and
UDA.
the PEP, UDA, which is an affiliate of PEP Brothers or something of that sort.
Okay.
But briefly, let us look at the outcome of this election and try to really look into the influence of President Uhuru Kenyatta, that is as a head of state and at the same time as a politician. What does these election results have to tell us about the political influence of President Kenyatta? Mr. Mwangani.
Thank you for having us today. When you talk about influence, I think if President Kenyatta had any influence at all in 2017, that influence has gone down by 70%. So if it was 100, then I think he's about 30. And that 30% is not across the country. It is restricted to certain regions. And I would go as far as saying certain constituencies. Because if the president would have personally campaigned in these places, in Bonchari, in Juja, and Ruri, he would still have lost. And this is the reason that the president has fallen out of grace with many of the voters who trusted him in 2017. His actions across board, beginning with how he has handled government, how he has handled the economy, how he has handled relations with the deputy president, those things have dented his image and his popularity across the country. So he would not have made any difference. Perhaps his campaigning would have then invited the deputy president to also campaign for the candidates that he was supporting, and then would have really seen a showdown. So what we are seeing is it paints the picture of how popular the Jubilee government is on the ground. And by the Jubilee government, I really mean President Kenyatta and the people he has fronted. I think he has really received a whiplash across the by-elections that we've seen since they came into office. So for me, we are likely to see more in the coming few days. That popularity is still going to go down because he's not improving on his performance. His actions are still degenerating. His emissaries, the cabinet secretaries, state appointees, are still making utterances that are continuously, increasing the gap between the president and the people.
Thank you. Mr. Kegoli, today we had a certain headline in one of the dailies that the president had to dress down some of his advisors. The names are not mentioned at all. Some of the tabloids brought out some of those names that indeed there are people who have been letting down the president in this entire process of the BBI, the entire process of the by-election, and losses have been coming his way. Do you think it is time the president wakes up that indeed things are not happening on his way, or it's just a tide from your observation?
Well, in the end, it's about who we elected as president. And much as the president has advisors, it is also incumbent upon him to choose and take decisions. And Kenyans will not care what the Attorney General, Paul Kihara, told the president or didn't tell him. We will ask the president, when we gave you the mandate to lead the country, what did you do with all the power instruments at your disposal? So in my observation, it's not even about the dress down, but what is the right thing to do for the country? And we have a conscious president, that those who say Of course, the president has let down the country here and there, but they wouldn't tell you where the president has done good for the country, you know, because you want to look at the legendary infrastructure that is ongoing in this country. And it's, you know, sometimes decisions can go for your favor or against you. And we've seen the court most of the time want to rule against, you know, like the government. And that is to be accepted, that is to be expected in a country governed by the rule of law and that is adherent to democracy. So this is very normal, and I appreciate the submissions my colleague here made, because the president let the people of Juja decide for themselves. And this is what happens when you let people decide. So they vote consciously. So people would vote like, let me vote for this candidate. And he rightly said the president did not personally go to make sure that this candidate won, because constitutionally, as things stand, the president is vacating office next year. So why would he be actively involved in campaigning right now? Because if he was running again for another term, I would be very worried if the president was losing momentum close to this election.
Thank you. Now, Mr. Kosgei, looking at the conduct of the Independent Electoral Boundaries Commission, a month ago we had all day here. Mr. Philip was here when we were trying to have a look at the Machakos senatorial by-election, and we were looking at it as a mock election of the next year. And what we saw in Juja when the fracas came about, you remember Governor Nyoro, and then
Yes.
Chebukati had to come, address the press, and the exercise continued a day later.
Yes, yes.
What is your analysis on the conduct of the IBC in the recent elections, and which hope or which picture is it trying to portray as far as the 2022 general election is concerned?
Whatever we are seeing right now, Musa, is a preview of what is coming in 2022. This is a preparation of what is coming in 2022. Whatever violence you saw in Kisii, and intimidation, and the letters written by ODM, the intimidation at Juja, that is what is coming in 2022. I want to commend the IEBC. IEBC did an exemplary job. This is why we question whether IEBC this time round is part of the deep state. I heard you talking about the deep state. This time round, the IEBC is trying to be so level that Chebukati had to stop the counting of votes just to allow the whole to come down. The governor of Kiambu, James Nyoro, had to be told to calm down because he went into the hall, disrupted everything, and Chebukati had to stand in. The commissions are established in our constitution. If I am not wrong, and Philip is here to correct me, then it is established under Article 80. And it is operationalized at Article 250. So this is a commission that is anchored in our constitution, and they should not fear anything. They should not fear to give us credible elections. When you use the police to intimidate the voters, that is when you lose as a country, and people will not have hope in running when they think that the police are going to be used. And I would like to tell the IEBC to make sure that whatever we are doing, a level playing field is created for all of us. Yeah.
Thank you. Now we come back into the tonight's topic. This is now the BBI punches. We've been here, Kegoli has been here, Mwangel has been here, and also Edgar, you've been here almost every time. And we have to agree that this journey of BBI has been a long one. It has faced a number of challenges, ranging from COVID, ranging from court orders. And even tonight, as we are gathered here, the IBC is facing another mountain. at the High Court. And the judges, the point that is now moving all over right now, ukipita huko kwa hoteli unaambiwa ama nikuite null and void. There's something that the judge talked of, unconstitutional, null and void. And Mr. Mwangale, as a lawyer, people have been asking themselves that in the year 2010, it was a president then, that is President Mwai Kibaki and former Prime Minister Raila Odinga, who spearheaded the process of actually changing the constitution to what we have right now. And they're wondering that why is it that at this time, the head of state is being termed as a persona non grata in the whole process. Before we now come into our topic, why is President Uhuru Kenyatta being viewed as having breached the constitution in spearheading this exercise, while President Kibaki wasn't actually vilified over this legally?
We have, there are two different things. When you look at the Constitution of Kenya 2010 and what is credited to Kibaki, he wasn't the originator of that process. There had been, a lot of clamor beginning in the early 90s towards a new constitution. So Kibaki and Raila were not the originators of the Constitution of Kenya 2010 amendment or repeal of the old constitution. It was the people. And that clamor began way back. And when you look at the court judgment, the judges were so gracious as to go back to the historical underpinnings of how we got to the Constitution of Kenya 2010 and what journey it was to get us there. So, and I remember, I think I mentioned some time back when we were here, that when you're looking at, because the question is about popular initiative and who should initiate an amendment on popular initiative, and I talked about the seat of the proposition. And our constitution provides that for you to say that you are amending the constitution by parliamentary initiative, the seat of the proposition must be parliament, the elected leaders. For you to say that you are amending by popular initiative, you have to get away from those who are elected, those who are serving the state. It is a preserve of the people entirely, the citizens, the ordinary citizens. And that is the distinction that the High Court made, which was very right, that we are not saying the president is not a Kenyan citizen, but because you have offered yourself up for election as president, as an elected leader, you have removed yourself from the ordinary citizen. That is one. Two, there's the other bit about certain parts of the constitution that cannot be amended by elected leaders.
Yes.
I think we have history across the African continent where presidents wake up one day, they are supposed to end their term, and then they decide that the constitution needs to be amended so that their term is increased, the term limits are removed. So it is to guard against such things happening, that you have elected leaders who would want to tinker in a broad way with the constitution that the people agreed upon. So there are those two things. One, you have what is the preserve of elected leaders by popular initiative, and then by parliamentary initiative, and then what is the preserve of the people. But when you're dealing with, and this is what the court referred to as the basic structure of the constitution, though in my view they should have gone ahead to really define certain parts of the constitution that constitute basic structure. But they were right in stating that there are certain aspects of the constitution that cannot be amended in a way that seeks to repeal the whole constitution. What we had in 2010 and with the constitution we have now was a repeal of the old constitution. If it had gone an amendment way, then it would have been a different story. So if you seek to change the constitution in a way that changes its face, changes its form, changes its substance in a very big way, then you cannot amend it in the limited way that the constitution provides as parliamentary initiative.
Thank you, Mr. Philip. Mr. Kegoli, looking at the judgment from the High Court judges just the other day, and the many loopholes, the many unconstitutional parts that the judges mentioned in their judgment, looking at the way the government is structured from the head of state, who is the head of the advisory board, issues to do with the law, the attorney general, the solicitor general, and all the resources in the exposure of the head of state. Why did this situation reach to that level, to an extent that such an embarrassment comes in broad daylight when the judges were pointing out the loopholes one by one, more than one? If it was one or two, ingeappear kwamba this was just an overlook, inaweza rekebishwa, na mbona ilikuwa nyingi to that level?
You know, when we gave ourselves this 2010 constitution, we had accepted certain fundamental changes, not only in our legislative process, but also through the judicial interpretational of the law. And whereas our courts are independent and they're subject only to the constitution, there is this aspect of separation of powers, but you will want to know that the executive, the legislature, and the judiciary are not fully independent of each other, because our constitution permits the judiciary to make a review of the pieces of legislation that sail through the National Assembly and the Senate. When you look at the England Constitution, the pieces of legislation that are passed are not subject to judicial review. When you go to the United States, the courts can review decisions made by Parliament. And in France, you will understand that there is a body that can make like review of our legislation. I'm drawing this analogy so that you get the scope of where we are as a country. And our judiciary, the landmark ruling, as many experts and legal minds have alluded to, points to that aspect of independence. Like, we are the judiciary, we can rule against the executive. And when you look at this ruling that the High Court 5-judge bench made, they have, number one, opened the president up for prosecution. But this, you will want to go into presidential immunity. The Constitution itself, like, protects the president from both civil and criminal proceedings. Here is a judgment, and our legal minds will help us interpret that state the president can be sued in his personal capacity. So our lawyers will help us understand that much more deeply. But then, Cornelius, look at it this way. The executive has been on spotlight, and many people have been saying that the executive is muzzling out the judiciary, and we've seen these in, people saying judiciary is underfunded, and the retired Chief Justice has also been on public complaining on the same. So if we make delivery of justice be dependent on the relationship between the executive and the judiciary, this is where we will be. But then again, just as this remuneration of our judges is under the consolidated fund, we should also make the judiciary budget as a no subject for discussion matter, so that their budget is guaranteed, whether or not the judiciary is in terms with the executive. Because when a judge takes up a case, in the end there will be a ruling. One will lose and one will win, or the case will be dismissed and everybody will bear their cost. But then again, here, people say that the president was embarrassed by this judgment. This was never, the case was never defended by the president. You get? So the president is not even listed, or was never listed in this case. So though the president is part of this BBI process, and his main intention was to leave behind a united country, a country where everybody feels welcome and everybody feels that sense of belonging. But then again, we need also to look at the issue of the economics of justice. When you want to make that ruling, can an honorable judge examine it against the prevailing circumstances, so that as you want to annul the process, what are you putting at stake? As you want to grant orders, as you want to make those orders, of what economic and legal and political sense are they going to make? Because law will never and has never existed in a vacuum. So as you make that ruling, examine it against the prevailing circumstances. What effort has been put into this process, and of what good is it going to do for this country? So when we look at it from that standpoint, and our president said it very correctly, that we have to treat our constitution as a living document, because we don't have to suffer the rigidity of the law. We can change and amend or repeal to suit the changing times and circumstances, so that we are living in a live country.
Thank you, Mr. Kegoli. Now, Mr. Kosgei.
Yes, sir.
There's a time when Jesus was walking with his disciples, and then some disciples began eating gano pole pole. Then there was a complaint. And then Jesus told them that man was not made for the law, but the law was made for man.
Yes.
Kegoli has brought up a very important point, that here, as a country, according to the head of state, that there are violence, there are these 9-point, we have
Agenda.
corruption,
Yes.
we have divisive elections, responsibilities and rights, shared prosperity, lack of national ethos, which all of us have been saying that indeed we do not have them. And in reality, Mr. Mwangale sometimes will tell you that corruption stinks to the highest heavens, and therefore something needs to be done. The Constitution of Kenya 2010 is proving not to be working in the right way. Some time president was crying, mnataka nifanye nini? Someone goes to court, Mwangale goes there, anamtetea, anapewa bail, they go home. So was the president doing any mistake by saying, wacha tubadilishe hii kitu, because it's not that man has been made for the law, but actually it's the law for the other way around?
If you heard Mwangale very well, he started by saying there are avenues of changing the constitution. One of the avenue is preserved for you and I, the local mwananchi, the Wanjiko. Another one is a preserve for the parliamentary people in the parliament. Those are the only avenues of changing this country. And once you are elected president, you cease to become we the people. You cannot speak on behalf of people. You cannot say we the people are changing the constitution. No, you can't. You remain a head of state and you can't change the constitution. Number two, you have asked about what is wrong in changing the constitution. There is nothing wrong. The 9 points agenda are great, Muse. They are amazing points. But the courts faulted the process of changing the constitution. It did not fault whatever was in that BBI document. It faulted the process. The process was you and I are to begin the process of changing the constitution. There are other things that are in the constitution that really upset the courts. One is the ombudsman. And I think that is where the attack was. How do you have the doctrine of separation of powers, as Kegoli had put it? He talked about separation of powers. The doctrine of separation of powers. How far can a court go in pushing the executive? How far can it go? How far can it go in stopping what the executive is doing? You know, that is the basic of the separation of powers. And then the doctrine of the basic structure is what also where the contention is. How much can you change a constitution? How much can you line up for a referendum? For what purpose? Are you going to change the structure of the government? Are you going to introduce a prime minister, hence changing it into a parliamentary form? We're not running a parliamentary country. No, we have a pure presidential system. So that is our basic, the most basic structure. So changing the constitution, Omuse, is great. Before we changed the 2010, before we came into the 2010 constitution, we had how many amendments? 37, right? We had around 37 amendments that had just changed everything from 1969 up to a moment where we had a new constitution. The new constitution gave birth to a new state. If you want to change the basic structure of the country, then you might give birth to another new state. You might. If you change the basic structure. So we are allowed to change a little. We are not allowed to change much. Most of it were infringing into the constitution. And that is where the problem is.
Thank you. Mr. Mwangale, before I interrupt you, on this matter that Edgar has spoken about the extent to which we can change the constitution, and this debate has been here for some time, and the main proponent of it has been the Deputy President, William Ruto, that there is a possibility of having multiple questions in the referendum. Edgar has advocated for it, that when you talk of we are moving from presidential system of government to parliamentary or to the hybrid system, that is one. Two, you go to the issue of the ombudsman, you go to the issue of the youth service, you go to the issue of help, and so many other legal issues that want to be changed there. Do you think between having yes or no, or voting for each and every item, don't you think it will still give the same results?
It will not, because, and this is the reason, and I agree with the reasoning of the court that you have to have, sets of propositions, because we must face it that while there are some who wholesomely support that constitutional amendment bill, there are some who have issues with some provisions, some proposals. So while you may support, the changing of the system of government, you may be opposed to, changes on county revenue allocation. You may be opposed to having the youth commission in the constitution. So those things that are problematic, and that is the reason why countries across the world have questions. If you are not repealing the whole constitution, then you must give citizens the opportunity to decide what they would want in the constitution and what they will not want in the constitution. And we have been mentioning this for a very long time. I remember there was a time we were here with I think it was Litswa, and we were talking about this multiple choice question and one question. So it's not about saying yes or no to the amendments. Citizens must be given the opportunity to choose what they would want in the constitution, because anyway it was being framed as a popular initiative. Then the citizens must be given that opportunity. Two, I think some people are getting it wrong on what the High Court was deciding on. The High Court was not deciding against the executive. It was not deciding against the president, in as much as some utterances or some pronouncements appeared to go against the person of the presidency. I think it's just coincidental that the people who have been assailing this constitution more are in the executive. The High Court was making a determination on constitutionalism. The High Court was making a determination on the rule of law. The High Court was making a determination on the sovereignty of the Kenyan people. If the president was caught in the crossfire and in the crosshairs of the High Court, I mean, it is up to him to mend his ways. It was not really against the executive. I think we really need to get that distinction. When you talk about and I've had this go around so much that the courts. I think my brothers also mentioned that the courts are making pronouncements against the executive. compare with the Kibaki government. The Kibaki government did not really, offend the constitution as much as we have seen the Uhuru government do. And so the courts were not so much against the Kibaki government. But we have seen concerted effort from the executive, right from 2013, 2017, concerted efforts to mutilate this constitution. The president says this is a living document, but you cannot treat a living document this way. You cannot treat life in the manner that President Uhuru Kenyatta has treated life. He has made effort to kill this constitution. So for me, we really must move in the direction that the High Court has directed. We really must handle the issues, and this is a point I should make as I conclude on that point, that for me, the problem is not with changing the constitution. I mean, we can change it as many times as we want. We can even repeal this constitution and decide that we will no longer have elected representatives. But we will not be addressing the problem. We have touched on the by-elections. We have seen violence, we have seen bribery. It's not the Constitution of Kenya 2010 that has been bribing voters. It is not the Constitution of Kenya 2010 that has caused chaos in these by-elections. It is the people and the elected representatives. It is us having a morality that is too flexible to give us direction. And I will just comment on something that my brother also mentioned, that we should not be tied down to the rigidity of the constitution and laws. One of the things that we must watch out for is having a constitution that is too flexible, that it does not give us definite direction. Having a constitution or a set of laws that is too flexible, that we cannot be guided down a path of prosperity. Yes, we cannot be rigid, but we must make sure that we are having a document, we are having a legal system that is compact enough to point us towards a certain future.
Thank you. Now, here we are remaining with 2 to 3 options that we are looking at. We as the people in the media, and also you as the analysts, people bring out these issues as they come. That is a Court of Appeal and the Supreme Court. We saw that the Attorney General yesterday went to the High Court and actually withdrew that appeal that they had put there. And then there is talk here and there that there is plans to cause a deliberate delay of the appeal to push this step to the Supreme Court. And I wonder, why should this come in here between? Because also we have time. The law talks of having a referendum 1 year before a general election. Which calculation could be going on here?
Uhuru Kenyatta is silent on what he is yet to do. We saw a surprise pullout from the Court of Appeal by the Attorney General Kihara. And he has been silent on what he is yet to do. Other quarters are talking about the Martha Koome taking office, and then things will start taking shape. Martha Koome has been read as part of the deep state. I don't want to say part of the executive because I'll be wrong. Martha Koome has been seen as the point, the breaking point, the easy point.
But just a perception, right?
It's a perception in the streets. So, and there are a few judges also. And the perceptions in the street is that they want to bypass the Court of Appeal to go to the Supreme Court. That is the perception in the streets. And I was just wondering why Uhuru Kenyatta has not shown us direction yet. But Uhuru Kenyatta is not someone who just goes down easily like that. He doesn't go down easily like that. He has a plan and he has a way, and we are waiting for him to come back and to address this issue. We are in the month of June. We're in the month of May. We are yet to go to the month of June. We have 2 months for us to get to 1 year to elections. And the referendum has to happen, if it has to happen, before August this year. And if they have to do something about it, they have to do it before August this year. Otherwise, it will be too late for them. Now, what is to happen before August? Will we have a parliamentary initiative? Is it possible? That is what we are going to ask ourselves. Are we going to introduce the bill? Is it going to go through the same process that it went through before? Because it has to go through that process. How long will it take to go through that process? The only way, if we are to go for a referendum, the only way is the Court of Appeal or the Supreme Court, if we have to have a referendum. The only way. And maybe lobbying. Now, I was also thinking this way. If they want this thing to happen, then there must be arbitration. If we must have a referendum, then the judges must bring arbitration. Arbitration in that they have to agree on the way forward for this constitution amendment. That now that the president has been leading this and it is against the constitution, can we, moving forward from now, remove the president? I don't know whether Nelson Harvey and group will accept that or whether they will say it is against the law. But there is a lot of bile as we speak right now between the executive and the judiciary from the beginning of Maraga's time up to the time that Maraga ended his office. There has been a lot of bile. So
thank you, Mr.
coming together, it's going to be hard.
Many thanks. Now, Mr. Kegoli, here still the situation is moving forward. And leadership has to go together with foreseeability in this sense that probably this issue will go to the Court of Appeal and to the Supreme Court. And probably these two courts will still uphold the decision of the High Court. What is likely, or what will be your best advice to the proponents of BBI and also the opposers of this process? The best advice to them: drop it away, we focus on the elections, or we force it and move forward?
Well, there is one aspect I'm looking at, and that is the concept of strictissimi juris. If the courts are going to uphold the concept, then I foresee another potential upset for the proponents of BBI. But if I'll go back to what I had submitted earlier, that as we make the ruling, can we examine it against the general public good? That it cannot entirely be faulty. Can the fault the courts have pointed out, because again, my learned friend here will attest.
He will attack you because
that
they only allow people who've done what they've done to be called learned friends. On a lighter note. That justice should not be delayed on the basis of technicalities. You cannot delay or deny justice on that. So we can, you see, when you revisit the ruling the Supreme Court made in 2013, yes, there are some technicalities that the court pointed out, but the court was so categorical that they could not warrant a nullification. But when you come to 2017 presidential election petition, it was nullified on the grounds as the court stated. But then again, in this BBI process, we have got so many good provisions that are in there. Look at the issue of Word Development Fund. Look at the innovation hubs that are going not only to our constituencies, but right at the ward level. Meaning, young people across the country do not have to worry about coming to Nairobi to make their dreams come true. They can still get funding right at the ward level, you get, through the committees that this BBI process is establishing. Look, for the first time, BBI would have proposed, actually it is in the BBI, that there is going to be a commission for young people. All those things have been mentioned. So my concern from you was if it goes to that level, the highest level of our judicial system, then they still uphold the situation. I just wanted to get your mind. What do you think will be the best approach, especially from the proponents of BBI?
No, you see, and I was getting to it, that when it gets to the apex court of the land, that is now where the matter will rest. If the court will still agree, say with the ruling of the High Court, and now the appeal, the Court of Appeal decision, and now it goes to the Supreme Court, and the entire process is defeated as it has been defeated right at the Constitutional Court of the High Court, then you and my friend who is a counsel will tell us, then the process is defeated. Just like, you know, a bill can be defeated in Parliament. Of course, if it doesn't meet a certain threshold, then the bill is defeated and the motion is lost. So you have to wait for some time and then reinstitute or relaunch the same process.
Thank you, Edwin. Now, Counsel Mr. Philip, looking at this situation, we usually have these talks that hii makelele itakuwa, lakini at the end of the day, because Gay will have his way or Edwin will have his way, depending on the circumstances. And there's this illusion or maybe some sort of suspicion that at some point there could be that push to a point that what come may, let this thing go through. And as the judges were reading out their conclusions the other day, they talked of the head of state could be actually be forced, the legal whatever could be laid against him after his rule. When you're out of power, then there are things that you committed. When you're in power, then actually you can be prosecuted for something like that. So what happens if at all this thing may be pushed to that level, iende ifikie huko juu, a force is put, a referendum is done, and then someone leaves power, then a new generation comes over, new leadership comes over. Are there grounds for prosecution and such things?
Of course, there the provision in our constitution that protects the president from criminal proceedings, and there must be a distinction that you have the president being protected from criminal proceedings and the president being open to civil suit. I think that distinction was made by the High Court. And if we take an example of what happened with Trump just the other day, I think there were some negotiations that happened after he left office because he was open to criminal charges. So it's very possible. I mean, it's possible for the president to leave office and then something is commenced against his person. That is a possibility. But what we are trying to guard against is to have that kind of scenario, because our political realities are that the people who get to high office have a huge following. And so if somebody leaves, and most of that following is his tribe. So if somebody leaves office and then, you know, criminal proceedings are commenced against him, we have not matured to the level where the presidents or whichever person that will be has their tribe divesting their interests from what will be happening at that point. So it would be dangerous for us to get to that level where the president leaves office and then he's charged or, you know, a trial is commenced against him. But what the courts were trying to do, and I think in my view, I don't think the Supreme Court will uphold the High Court judgment for the reasons that I think in my assessment that Supreme Court has divergent opinions and views, and there are people on that bench who have other dispositions, predispositions aside from you know, pure law. But that is a story for another day. So for me, the Supreme Court might not uphold what the High Court ruled against the BBI process. But if it does uphold, then I think that will be what the law would be at that point. And so if they continue, if the BBI process continues, it will be in line with what the Supreme Court would have directed. If the executive bulldozes their way, because we have seen this happening in the past, that they could actually bulldoze their way, there are consequences. Those consequences will be catastrophic to individuals. I think people should know that once rubber meets the road, you would not be charged as an office holder. You will be charged as an individual. It might take a while, it might take years even, but justice and you know, the law would still catch up with you. So people must really take caution when they are exercising power that has been given to them by the people. And we must really you know, ensure that those we are electing know this for a fact. Going up to as high as the president, that you do not have free will to assail the constitution. You do not have free will to do things that contravene the law just because you are protected from criminal proceedings. So I think that is a distinction that must be made, and you know, Kenyans are watching.
Thank you. Now, here comes our parting shots. Due to time, we have a baby here in the name of BBI. The baby has really traveled a long journey, and this baby has to pass through the hands of different caregivers. That is the judiciary, National Assembly, the masses, that's the public, sometimes also the media here where we are seated, and so many other players, the executive. And from what Kegoli is saying, and sometimes even Mr. Mwangale, sometimes even Mr. Kosgei, they talk of this baby has got some potential of being a greater person in future and also to help the society. So from your parting shots, we wish you to bring to the country and to the whole world, what is your best advice or the best approach that now mambo yanaendelea kwenda mrama? How can these four players, the public, the judiciary, the executive, and now the legislature, come together to see that they find a common ground? Beginning with Mr. Kosgei, as you do your parting shot, Mr. Kegoli, and also Mr. Mwangale.
Thank you very much. My parting shots are, what is the hurry for? Why are we running in trying to amend the constitution before the end of Kenyatta's government? Why are we running? A few days ago, I had to examine why. And I came up with a conclusion that the office of the deputy president is going to be changed into an office that of a vice president. I don't know whether I'm right or wrong, but I saw that. If you change that office into an office that you can hire and fire, then the first victim that was going to be on the chopping board after that promulgation was going to be the deputy president. He was going home to be fired by the president. I don't know whether that's true or not, and I think that is where the hurry
Mwangale
is.
will answer us briefly in his parting shot.
Number two, I just want to repeat what I said. We do not have to hurry. Let us have it as popular initiative or parliamentary, in whichever way. Let's come together and push this thing forward without bribery, without violence, without showing that you can push things.
Thank you. Mr. Kegoli, in summary.
I invite the political class to the provisions of Article 159 of the Kenyan Constitution, where the sovereignty of the people is vested in the judiciary. So it is not 5 people sitting to make a ruling. It is 5 judges who've been given sovereignty by the people of Kenya by way of...
Through the constitution.
Yes, voting in the constitution. I would advise that we measure our words so that we continue to build the momentum of confidence in our judiciary. Let us respect the rule of law, because when you set a precedent of violating the constitution and not respecting court orders and vilifying the judiciary, then what you're telling the general public is that these people are just some people there. So let us have that sense of respect for the rule of law and for the BBI process. I have been, and I'm still a proponent of the BBI bill, and I hold the view that as much as perhaps there could have been a fault line somewhere in the process, but I pray that the courts find favor in finding merit in this document, because it also holds some good for the country, much as the process could be. They could also help like correct here and there, but then again, we've already invested time in this process. And remember, it is this BBI that brought this country to stability. Remember, it is as a result of the president meeting Raila Odinga on the steps of Harambee House that the country's GDP began to appreciate. It is after the president had met Right Honorable Raila Odinga that Kenyans started to live and work without worry. Before that, this country, Cornelius, you know where the country was headed. And you had people making claims that we want to secede some parts of this country. It is this BBI that saved this country from utter possible anarchy. So the judges should also bring themselves alive to the reality that BBI stopped as possible splitting of this country.
Thank you, Mr. Mwangale. In summary, also harmonization, or what should really be done towards seeing that this baby is not killed, and what will fika kombele now one is among themselves.
Tying that with what my brother has mentioned, I think the two people coming together pointed us to what the problem was. The problem was not the laws. The problem was not even the people of Kenya. The problem was those individuals who were leading their troops in the direction that we were headed. And I think that pointed us to the problem. Using the baby analogy that you've just made mention to, I think this BBI is a baby born out of an extramarital affair. The High Court judgment was the paternity test, and it has revealed that this baby did not belong to the Kenyan people. And if we continue insisting that the baby is the people's, then of course we would face what happens when these things occur in marriages. So we are not saying let us not come together. We are not saying kill the baby, and by the baby I mean it is what the discussions we were having. We are saying let us have these discussions within the confines of the law. Let us have these discussions within the confines of the Constitution. And as we are doing so, let us divest, partisan political interests from the interests of the nation. Let us understand that what the president and the former prime minister consider or perceive as public good is not necessarily public good. Public good is defined by the public itself. It is the people who should decide what is good for them. It is not for certain individuals to decide that this is good for the people. Now let us go back to them.
If the people decide to sit on juu ya kaa la moto, what is good for them?
That will be what the people would have decided. I mean, you cannot. We have situations in some countries where people have decided, to go a certain direction that was not beneficial to them. But then that is the decision of the people, and that is why the Constitution says the sovereignty of the people of Kenya is key. We, the people, can decide that we do not want a government. We would have made the decision, but let us maintain the sanctity of the sovereignty of the people of Kenya.
Many thanks. That is a very wonderful description and discussion from the three gentlemen who are well versed with matters law, matters politics, and matters governance. That is Mr. Edgar Kosgei, who is a resident analyst, and also Mr. Edwin Kegoli, who is a political scientist, and also Mr. Philip Mwangale, who is a counsel and a leadership and a governance consultant. Together on Power Brief tonight, we've had the opportunity to dissect into part of the contentious issues that the judges of the High Court raised when they gave a judgment regarding the BBI bill. And we've had to look into it with our panels, giving a way forward on what is likely to be done so as to see that the country remains one. We appreciate your overwhelming responses on our social media platforms, your participation in this conversation. Remember, always on Power Brief, what we focus on is our national mantra, that is peace, love, and unity. From me, Cornelius Omuse, and the entire Power Brief production team, I thank you for your audience always, and I wish you a very good night till next Thursday. May God keep you till we meet for such a wonderful and insightful discussion. Have a very good night.